Imagine her, the beautiful youngest daughter of movie goddess Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier, the extraordinary princess of the Principality of Monaco, Princess Stéphanie. A woman born a princess in the palace, scandalized by her rebellious spirit and behavior. Are you ready to follow a life story full of pain, fame, love, scandal, deep resentment, and new beginnings? The legendary news begins. The real life of Princess Stéphanie, who opened her eyes as a princess and the youngest child in the Monaco palace, was far from the image of a fairy tale and romantic princess. Her life was full of many difficulties, twists and turns and obstacles. Let's dive into this dramatic life story and take a look at the life story of Princess Stéphanie, also known as the Rebel Princess. Stéphanie was born in the Palace of Monaco in 1965, the third child of Prince Rainier of Monaco and iconic Hollywood star and Princess Grace Kelly of Monaco. And over the years, Stéphanie has been at the forefront of the public eye for her scandals, her love affairs, and her callousness towards life. And she has been a royal who has caused trouble for her family. From the very first day of her birth, Princess Stéphanie's life was seen by everyone as a perfect fairy tale. However, behind all the glittering palaces, prestigious titles, and seemingly limitless wealth, what no one really knows is that her mother died in a car accident while she was with her, leaving her with a severe psychological trauma and a life that is not easy at all. This struggle sometimes manifested itself in deep loneliness, sometimes in rebellious behavior, unbecoming of a princess, and was referred to in the tabloid press as the disgrace of her family. In fact, Princess Stéphanie has had a not easy life since the day she was born. Let's trace her life story together, which is full of extraordinary, sometimes dramatic and tragic events. In the meantime, let's take a brief look at her real personality and emotional life. Although she is known to the public as Princess Stéphanie, her real name is Princess Stéphanie Marie Elizabeth Grimaldi, and since she was born on February 1st, 1965, into one of the most glamorous and intriguing families in the world, she has been followed by the world press for years and still continues to be followed by the world press. This was because she was the youngest child of Hollywood star Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier III of Monaco. But this privileged life was more of a curse than a blessing for Stéphanie. While being a royal is remarkable in itself, little Princess Stéphanie's parents were not part of an ordinary dynasty. They were a glittering symbol of love and glamour that left its mark on world history. Her mother, Grace Kelly, was a legendary Hollywood star, idolized by millions for her grace, beauty, and fairy tale life. Her father, Rainier, was a powerful monarch who modernized Monaco. Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier's decision to marry caused a storm all over the world. Newspapers ran headlines for days, and radio stations broadcast news about the event that excited and intrigued the public. Their wedding was called the Wedding of the Century. The union created great excitement all over the world and received a lot of coverage in the tabloid press. That day, more than 30 million people tuned in to the world's television sets to watch this spectacular wedding and immerse themselves in a fairy tale. Born into such a family and raised in the shadow of this glamorous life, little Stéphanie, unlike her older sister Caroline and older brother Albert, was no different from most children. Like most children, she struggled to live up to her family's expectations. She was not at the front of the throne, but her ambitious parents expected her to excel. Ballet lessons, piano lessons, horseback riding, gymnastics, and other sports. Childhood meant more of a disciplined program for her than games. From an early age, it was clear that Stéphanie was different. Her older sister Caroline was a more demure figure, following her mother's elegant shadow at formal ceremonies. Albert was growing up with the weight of being a future monarch. Stéphanie, on the other hand, was different from the start. Energetic, cheerful, not afraid to break the rules and not hiding her inner freedom. Stéphanie had an unbridled fire inside her. Aside from her warmth, humour and intelligence, she quickly developed a reputation as the rebel child in the family. Her mother, Grace Kelly, nicknamed her enfant terrible, meaning wild child. This lively personality was a foreshadowing of the extraordinary life she was to lead. Defying royal expectations, she forged her own path and went down in history as a princess who managed to create a different image. It was not for nothing that she was called the wild child at court. She excelled in gymnastics and amazed her teachers in ballet classes. In music lessons, she spent minutes at the piano, not only learning the notes but also trying out her own melodies. Grace Kelly saw Stéphanie's different nature very well. Stéphanie was the child with whom Grace Kelly bonded the most, because she saw in her own youth, a young woman trying to break the mold, a young woman who wanted to choose her own path. Her father had a different perspective. Rainier was a more traditional, disciplined and strict figure. He put Monaco's reputation above all else. While he admired more well-adjusted children like Caroline and Albert, Stéphanie's rebellious spirit worried him. According to one account, a member of the palace staff once quoted Rainier as looking at his daughter, smiling and saying, "This girl will cause us a lot of trouble one day. But no one will be able to extinguish her light." This sentence was perhaps a foreshadowing of things to come. Stéphanie spent her childhood in Monaco, but was sent to Paris for her education. Like other members of the princely family, Princess Stéphanie was passionate about sports. Here, in addition to ballet and music lessons, she excelled in gymnastics. While studying in Paris, she competed in gymnastics and won the Grand Prix de Gymnastique de la Ville de Paris in 1978 and 1979, making her a source of pride for Monaco. Always keen to discover new things, Princess Stéphanie has an impressive list of hobbies, including swimming, water skiing, and downhill skiing. At the same time, her interest in fashion manifested itself at an early age. She loved touching fabrics and examining designs. During her high school years, she had the opportunity to intern at Dior's atelier in Paris. At that age, working at the creative heart of the world brand was an incredible experience for her. "I'm not just a princess, I can create too," she said. Her relationship with her mother Grace Kelly was very close. Grace instilled in her culture and elegance. But Stéphanie's bold and rebellious personality was often at odds with her mother's more controlled and restrained demeanour. Her older sister Caroline always behaved in a more serious, aristocratic manner, while her older brother Albert was serious about being heir to the throne. Stéphanie was always different. In photographs, Caroline looked like an elegant lady, while Stéphanie was often laughing. Already in those days, the press gave her a title, the rebellious Princess of Monaco. Stéphanie felt trapped by her rules, seeking freedom. Her mother's gentle encouragement stabilized her. But this balance would not last long, because the day that would lead her to the biggest trauma of her life was very close. The turning point in Stéphanie's life occurred on September 13th, 1982. The morning of September 13th, 1982. that painful day. The weather is clear, the sky sparkling. A car glides down the mountainous roads of Monaco. Princess Grace Kelly at the wheel, her youngest daughter Stéphanie beside her. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary mother-daughter road trip. But what would happen in a few minutes would turn into a tragedy that would be remembered not only by one family, but by the whole world. On that day, they set off for Monaco from their chalet in Roc Agel. The road was winding, full of sharp turns. Suddenly, Grace's body stopped responding. According to rumours, she had a stroke, lost control of the steering wheel. The car skidded off the cliff before she had a chance to brake. Screams rose from inside as the car rolled for meters, iron bending, glass shattering. In a few seconds, it is all over. Silence. The accident claimed the life of Grace Kelly, the legendary star of Hollywood, the Princess of Monaco. The woman adored by millions was no more. Stéphanie was only 17 at the time. She survived the accident, but she carried both physical scars and emotional scars that would last for years. For her, the loss was not only the loss of a mother, but also a shattering. Because Grace Kelly, everyone's idol, was the mainstay of Stéphanie's life. From that moment on, no one would ever understand her in the same way. Nothing would ever be the same. Grace Kelly's funeral was a state funeral. Kings, queens, and dignitaries came from all over the world. The paparazzi never left the palace for a moment. The eyes of the world were on this ceremony in Monaco. But there was one thing missing. Stéphanie was not at her own mother's funeral. Because she was still in hospital after the accident, unable to move because of the injuries to her neck. When she watched the funeral on television, she burst into tears. She was alone on the bed, while her sister Caroline, her brother Albert, and her father Rainier walked behind the coffin. Imagine losing your mother but not being able to say goodbye to her. This is where the wound in Stéphanie's soul deepened. This tragedy suddenly put her in the centre of the world's attention. Before she had a chance to mourn, some newspapers wrote, "Was Stéphanie behind the wheel? Could there be a greater burden for a young girl?" She had lost her mother. She still had the pain of the accident in her body, but she also had to live with the shadow of blame. Stéphanie kept silent about it for years. Years later, Stéphanie would say of these rumours, "I only lost my mother." I can't forget that moment for the rest of my life. People didn't know that and kept judging me. It was not fair. Stéphanie spent her teenage years struggling with grief and the harsh judgments of society. This pain, loneliness, and struggle for survival are at the heart of Stéphanie's story. According to psychologists, such a loss, especially when experienced during adolescence, shakes the foundations of the personality. Stéphanie was in this very period. At the age of 17, she lost her mother while trying to find her own identity. Therefore, her later life would always be characterized by an effort to re-establish her identity. The palace protocol, the ceremonies, the glamorous life, it no longer meant anything to her. And she began to look elsewhere for a way to fill the void. In music, in fashion, in love, in freedom. And this trauma would guide her in every choice she would make in the future. Her courage as a singer, her love outside the rules, her days in the circus, even her struggle against HIV and AIDS disease, all were echoes of that trauma. On that bitter day, Grace Kelly's life ended. But on that same day, the storms inside Stéphanie began. And those storms would never subside. In the mid-1980s, Stéphanie entered fashion. She worked as a model and launched her own swimwear line. With her striking beauty and bold spirit, she quickly became the center of attention in the fashion world. She graced the covers of important magazines such as Vogue and Vanity Fair. Her step into the world of music was as bold as fashion. Her first single, Oregon, released in 1986, was a huge hit in Europe and sold more than 2 million copies. With the album she released afterwards, she entered pop music. Although she received mixed reviews from critics, her music career established her as a pioneer who stepped outside traditional royal roles. The song topped the charts in France from the very first week. It stayed at #1 for 10 weeks. She was being danced to in clubs across Europe. Wherever she was, the rebel princess had suddenly become a pop icon. The music video was as talked about as the song. With her short hair, confident demeanor, and rebellious looks, Stéphanie was far from the image of a princess. The tabloid press went crazy. The Princess of Monaco is now a pop star. The same year, in 1986, her first album, Besoin, was released. The album reached #6 on the French and Swedish charts. Radio, television programs, magazine covers. Stéphanie was everywhere. At that time, the posters of young people in Europe included Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Princess Stéphanie of Monaco. What set her apart was not only her songs, but her style. In those years, Stéphanie preferred an androgynous look: short hair, masculine clothes, tie combinations. This image was very suitable for the punk and pop culture of the 80s. For Stéphanie, these songs were therapy. Singing was a way out of her pain, loss, and trauma. In Michael Jackson's song In the Closet, there is a mysterious female vocal. For a long time, it was debated who this voice belonged to, and it was allegedly Stéphanie's voice. This was a detail that the tabloid press adored. Stéphanie released her second album, Stéphanie, in 1991. But this album was not as successful as the first one. In 1992, the music book was closed. Stéphanie never released new songs again. But this was not a failure for him, because music was not a means of commercial success for him from the beginning, but a way to heal his soul. A sentence she said during those years speaks volumes. "When I sang on stage, I wasn't a princess. I was just Stéphanie." Stéphanie, who had held on to life with music in those years, would next sail into bigger storms. Romances, scandals, and a private life that made headlines all over the world. Stéphanie's private life was as colourful and turbulent as her career. Her passionate and sometimes tempestuous relationships were constantly in the media's spotlight. Already in 1985, her intimacy with French actor Anthony Delon, son of the legendary Alain Delon, made headlines. Their brief time together was covered by the European press with the headline, "Rebellious Princess and Movie Star's Son." The relationship was short-lived, but Stéphanie remained on the tabloid agenda as one of the most popular young women of that period. Soon after, her name was mentioned with American star Rob Lowe. It was rumoured that they met during a trip to the US, but the relationship was never confirmed. Still, the legend around the young princess was growing. She was no longer just the daughter of Monaco, but an international icon. And then, the French racer Paul Belmondo, son of the famous actor Jean-Paul Belmondo. Several photos of Stéphanie and Paul together sparked rumours of love. Although the traditional circles of Monaco frowned upon these intimacies, for Stéphanie they were a way of searching for her own identity. By the end of the 1980s, every line written about him seemed more like a story of freedom than a fairy tale. The early 1990s, And it is during those years that she loses her heart to someone unexpected, her bodyguard, Danielle Ducrouet. Their affair was soon in the media. The palace reacted strongly. Another scandal was that Danielle Ducrouet's girlfriend at the time was pregnant. But Stéphanie didn't care. She followed her heart. In 1992, their first child, Louis, was born. And in 1994, their second child, Pauline. With difficulty, Stéphanie persuaded her father, Prince Rainier, to formalise their relationship, and in 1995, she married Daniel Ducrouet. But things didn't turn out like a fairy tale. In 1996, paparazzi leaked photos of Daniel Ducrouet's infidelity by the pool with another woman. Newspapers around the world carried those pictures under the headline, "Princess's Husband Caught in Infidelity." This was the end of a scandalous relationship and marriage. They divorced less than a year into their marriage. But the tabloids had a new title for Stéphanie: The Scandalous Princess. Stéphanie's love life was not limited to Daniel Ducrouet. In 1998, her third child was born, Camille Marie Kelly Gottlieb. Camille's birth also turned into a scandal, because her father and Stéphanie were not officially married. For a long time, the public debated who Camille's father was. It was later revealed that Camille's father was Jean-Raymond Gottlieb, a policeman in Monaco. This relationship did not turn into a formal marriage. In 2003, she took another extraordinary step by marrying circus artist Adans Lopez Perez. Travelling around the world with her circus for a while, Stéphanie once again showed her free spirit. However, this marriage also ended in 2004. In 2005, after her father's death, Stéphanie took over the presidency of the Monte Carlo International Circus Festival. She thus continued her father's legacy. Today, the annual festival is still considered the most prestigious circus event in the world. For her, the circus is an asset that keeps her childhood memories and her father's legacy alive. Imagining a princess in a circus tent, that image is a story in itself. That's why Stéphanie continues to attract millions, because every time she chooses a path outside the expected, and it's a path that has not only landed her on the pages of the tabloids, but also in Monaco's cultural history. Despite these extraordinary choices, Stéphanie remained deeply committed to humanitarian work. In 2004, she founded Fight AIDS Monaco to fight HIV and AIDS disease and support patients. She was highly respected for this work. She was also honorary president of the Monte Carlo International Circus Festival, turning her interest in circus arts into a cultural legacy. The relationship between Stéphanie and her father, Prince Rainier, was a story of conflict mixed with love. The year 2005 marked the beginning of a new chapter in Stéphanie's life because her father Rainier III died after a long period of ill health. But there was a bitter surprise for Stéphanie. Out of an inheritance of billions of dollars, her father had left her very little. Stéphanie has never made a public statement about this, but according to those close to her, she was deeply hurt by this decision because she felt that her father did not fully accept her. What do you think about this? Do you think her father, Prince Rainier, is right? Stéphanie's life is a glorious fairy tale on the outside, but on the inside there are deep resentments and disappointments. And this story of inheritance has been one of the most important turns in her life. As a mother, Stéphanie has always been a determined good mother. She often kept her children out of sight to protect them from the pressures of the court. She tried to give them an ordinary life. In an interview, she said, "The most important thing for me is that they are happy." I didn't want to squeeze them into the royal rules. They were children first, then children of the princess. This approach enabled her children to grow up as independent individuals. Today, all three have made their own paths. Perhaps this was Stéphanie's greatest achievement, raising her children lovingly, freely, and strongly, despite all the storms. Today, she is not just a princess or a scandalous figure, but a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 2 grandchildren. And she is most proud of this identity. Perhaps for the first time, she has found a balance in her own life, neither completely secluded nor completely in the centre of the tabloids. She lives a more peaceful life within the boundaries she has established, but who has finally found her voice. A young girl who once symbolised the storm with her song Oregon. Today she is an activist who shields the storms of others, a mother and grandmother who finds peace with her children and grandchildren. And perhaps the biggest lesson we can learn from her life is that sometimes the biggest storms create the strongest women. If you are interested in the hidden stories behind the scenes of the royal family, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.